What's up, guys? Advantage Sports Talk. Now, we are talking about the college football playoffs and primarily the fact that the Florida State Seminoles are not getting into the playoffs. And I'm just getting into why that is so bad, okay? And I'm going to put a crazy scenario out there for you, a very hypothetical scenario that is not impossible. If this happens, it will be the most horrible thing that can happen right now for college football and the playoff system, and it will really show just how flawed this system is if this happens. Now, this is the final year of the 4-team playoff system, which is very good for reasons like this. Okay? I personally don't believe Texas should be in the playoffs. I think they are ranked lower than UGA and Ohio State. Now, with 4 teams getting in, I don't think Ohio State should be in, but I think UGA definitely should be. Now, I'm an Ohio State fan, but I'm not biased when it comes to judging teams. I do think UGA should definitely get that spot over Texas. Why? Because their only loss is to Alabama. Texas's only loss is to OU, Oklahoma University, but I guess because they beat Alabama, they're giving them all this huge credit, and they're saying, well, they beat Alabama. We got to put them in the playoffs because of that win over Alabama. And I don't disagree with that logic because that is a big win, but I do not believe that Texas is more deserving than UGA or Ohio State. Ohio State's only loss is to Michigan, who is now the number 1 team, who is also an undefeated team. UGA's only loss is to Alabama. But I guess since Alabama was a 1-loss team coming into that game, they considered that a very significant loss, even though Alabama is now a playoff team. Now, here's the scenario that I'm playing out for you. If this happens, again, this is not a prediction, this is hypothetical. If Florida State beats if Florida State beats UGA by 20 points or more, by the standards of football, that's a blowout. 20 points, 21 points, that's a blowout, okay? If they beat UGA by that much and they finish the season undefeated and they're not the champions, that is going to be a horrible, horrible look for the playoff committee in college football. I mean, an absolutely horrible look. And let's take it a step further. Let's say Texas wins the national championship. Texas wins the championship. The Florida State Seminoles beat UGA and end up finishing undefeated and not being the champions, even after beating a team like UGA, who spent a majority of this season as the number 1 team in college football. That would be absolutely horrible. In fact, I think some people would go as far as looking at Florida State as the actual champions if that happens, even though they're not going to be, regardless of how you look at it. You can look at it however you want, but we have no say in this. If that does happen, that would be absolutely horrible. Now, why is that possible? Because I'm hearing stories about certain players not playing in that game. Now, from what I understand, I believe Florida State's quarterback's injured, but if a lot of UGA players sit out that game, I'm not going to say a lot because it's unlikely that a lot, but let's just say key players sit out that game. Because I heard some of them may sit out, like seniors, people who are going to the NFL draft, they don't want to risk their stock, where they can get injured or something like that, and they don't feel like this game is really big enough to really put that on the line for. And I don't blame them for that whatsoever. If this happens and Florida State ends up finishing undefeated, especially if they blow UGA out, it will be very difficult to justify looking at that team and saying, we still don't believe they were playoff worthy. I mean, and of course it wouldn't matter at that point because you would already have a champion. And if Texas wins the championship, which I don't see that happening, I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen in another video. But for the sake of this video, let's say Texas wins the championship and Florida State beats UGA by a very good margin. that would be absolutely horrible. Now, I'm already telling you, this is one of the worst snubs. I'm going to take it further. This is the worst snub in college football history. Now, it seems like they really wanted Alabama to be in there, but I don't believe Texas should have made it. I think Texas should have been left out, and UGA should have been in there because, UGA's resume is better than Texas. Texas lost to UO earlier this year. UGA's one loss is to Alabama. Now, they're looking at how recent the loss was, and they're looking at the current situation of the teams. I do understand that, but I'm not convinced that Texas should be ranked past Alabama or even Ohio State. Ohio State's only loss was to Michigan, and Michigan is the number one team in college football right now. Now, they weren't number one at the time when they beat Ohio State, but they were undefeated. I think they were number 2 at that time. So that right there. But since there's only 4 spots, you have to put Washington in. They're undefeated. You have to put Michigan in as undefeated team. But leaving UGA out, leaving Florida State out and putting Texas in is the part that is absolutely absurd. I would even say Florida State deserves to be in more so than Alabama. Well, that is a tough argument because Alabama did beat the number 1 UGA, who is... I'm not going to take it that far, okay? I'll take that back. But you cannot convince me that Florida State is not a more deserving team than Texas. Just because Texas beat Alabama a while ago, okay? And that defeats the logic that they're using. Because, okay, here's the logic. Alabama's loss was a while ago, right? Okay, they're a one-loss team, but it's been a while. Okay, well, Texas's win over Alabama was a while ago. In fact, it's the same exact game. So how can you use that as a logic? Because the logic works against itself as logic to why Texas is in the playoffs instead of Florida State, instead of UGA. Either Florida State or UGA should be in over Texas. That is it. There's no way Texas is better than UGA and Florida State. There's just no way of that. So, yeah, there we have it. If Texas wins the championship and Florida State beats UGA, the college football committee is going to look absolutely horrible. And that is going to be horrible for college football. Again, this is the final year for the 4-team playoff system, which is very good for stuff like this because I personally believe Florida State, UGA, and Ohio State are all playoff teams. I think there should be at least 8 teams in. Not, 4, but obviously the system is overdue, and for reasons like this, it's very good that they're changing the system because this is absolutely horrible. Leave your opinion. Do you think I'm wrong on my opinion? Do you think they got it right? I'll be surprised if anybody actually believes that ranking ship is absolutely right and that Texas is a better team than Ohio State, UGA, and Florida State, because I think that is absolutely absurd.